Um, where do I begin? It's this life is miraculous and there's magic happening all the time. Um, but I think I will stick with some of my patient stories. They are some of the most transformative for me. I will talk about Mrs. Wilma, and of course, I have changed their names for their family's privacy. Mrs. Wilma was a NODA patient. NODA stands for No One Dies Alone, and it's a program that's hospital based. And what they do is they ask for volunteers. You do like a weekend training, and they ask for volunteers through email, and you sign up in 3 hour shifts for people to sit with people with patients who are dying who don't have family. Maybe they never had kids. Maybe they're the last of their kind. Maybe they burned all those bridges and no one wants to be there. For a number of reasons, people are dying alone. So I signed up for Mrs. Wilma's shift and I went in to sit with her and they give you a little rundown of her. I knew she was a Black woman who was Baptist and elderly. So that's kind of what I knew. So I put on some, you know, hymns and was kind of letting my phone play music. And I was going to sit bedside with her and I closed my eyes and I just kind of center myself and I try to connect to something greater than myself. God, angels, the universe, all that is, whatever vocabulary word works for whoever's listening, connecting to something greater than me. And as I did, I'm setting an intention or saying a prayer. I'm having my own little inner dialogue in order to bring peace to Mrs. Wilma. And I opened my eyes, and a young girl is walking into the hospital room, and she's in black and white. Now, that's when I recognized that it would be a spirit form person, a spirit being, because because she's in black and white. So a person, whenever I see them in black and white, usually means a time frame of 1920s to like 1969, respectively. Don't know. That's just what my brain does. My So here comes this little girl, and I recognized her as a young Mrs. Wilma. And her hair is like twisted in braids, and she's wearing her Sunday best dress. And I had this amazing feeling of unconditional love and expansiveness. Like I could be bigger than the room. And if you put me in a bigger room, I could be bigger than that room, just huge and free. And I had this sudden knowing or feeling of an overarching theme in Mrs. Wilma's life of separation. As a child who went through segregation, and being forced to be separate in her community. And now here she is dying alone, separate from her family. And this was something that I guess was something she had struggled with her entire life. And when young Mrs. Wilma took my hand, the hospital room transformed into this forest. And I know how out there this sounds, but suddenly I was aware of being in two worlds at once. I was sitting bedside in a hospital with my left hand holding elderly Mrs. Wilma's hand, and my right hand is holding young Mrs. Wilma's hand, and I'm also in this forest. And she begins, just to summarize, I go into greater detail in the book, but to summarize, she's like, look at this forest. We're going to come over here to this one tree and we're going to climb this one tree. And somehow we do, just by thinking about it, we are at the top of the tree. And I had a full 360 view of the entire forest, even though I'm only looking straight ahead. And she was like, this one tree is one life, seemingly. But this one tree has all of these roots. Each one of those roots thinks that it's its own one little root life. And every branch on this tree thinks that it's a branch living its branchy life, and every little branch branching off the branch, and every single leaf believes it's its own life. This whole tree is teeming with all these individual lives, and yet it's one tree. And this one tree is actually a bigger part of this forest, which is a bigger part of an even greater landscape. And the whole thing was about connection and how we are all connected and how we are all really one, even though we perceive ourselves as separate individual lives. So it was just really a beautiful experience. It came with a lot of emotions and feelings. And it was this amazing teaching that in her final moments before she took her final breath, she was teaching me about the importance of connection and how we are all one when she had had this whole physical life of separation. So that's one of the more magical stories that I've experienced.